What is going on, guys? Today we're going to be looking at the brand new controller from the guys and gals over there at Gamesir. This controller has been sort of making the rounds for the last few weeks. I've gotten a lot of comments asking if a review is coming, and the answer is yes. In fact, I've had this thing for, I think, almost 2 months now. This is the Gamesir X2S, as you can see. March the 10th is the release date, probably the day that you're watching this or sometime after that when you are watching this. This is meant to be an upgraded version of the Gamesir X2, but rather strangely, at least at launch, it's cheaper than the X2. So this is the X2, which was normally $69, at least buy used here on Amazon. This thing's only $45.99. There's actually a lot of cool stuff about this, namely one big thing, which I'm not really going to be testing here as a non-iPhone user, but for some of you that are going to be buying this to use on your iPhone, this is pretty cool. iPhone 15 is now supported because it has a USB-C port, and this controller will work with your iPhone. We've also got Hall effect joysticks, which is really, really nice as well. I don't want to spend any more time here. Let's jump straight into the unboxing and more details. All right, so we have the Gamesir X2S Type-C wired mobile gaming controller. As you can see, the design is a little bit different from the last controller that I reviewed on this channel that had the much larger grips. This is going to be one that might be a bit easier to throw into a bag or something like that. If we flip it over, we have several different notes here as well. Hall effect joysticks, great to see. That means good longevity. They should not develop stick drift over time. The USB-C port is down there as well, so it is plug and play. Micro switch buttons, Hall effect action triggers as well. Screenshot button, tactile D-pad, 2 milliamp hour low power consumption, and then rubber grips on the back. Everything sounds pretty good. So let's pop this box open and we'll slide this thing out. Unparalleled performance, await your command. A better slogan than on the last video. I don't remember what it was, but I remember thinking it didn't really make a lot of sense. So that's a better one. Ooh, look at that. So I do really like the colors on these things. I love that they're kind of going with like the old school like Super Nintendo colors. Very much approved of in that regard. What's in the box? Looks like, oh, some little rubber tips for the joysticks. That's a nice little thing to have, a little value add, and then probably just your manual. And let's pull up the controller itself. And like I mentioned, it is definitely going to be much easier to fit into a bag, much smaller footprint. But you've also got one other big change that I think a lot of you watching this video are going to really approve of, and it's the position of the USB-C port. And yes, it is a USB-C port that is mobile once again, which makes it really easy to plug this thing in. You don't feel like you're putting a ton of pressure on your USB-C port on your device. Why is it cool that it switched sides? Well, because for those of us that are using a foldable phone, let me show you what typically happens here. So if we plug this thing in here into this model, what you wind up with is the screen sticking way down below. Now, obviously, this is the Pixel Fold, and it is a landscape tablet, so it's wider than it is tall. And that can be just a little bit weird, a little bit awkward. Kind of reminds me a bit of the PlayStation Portal. Whereas this is on the other side. So if you prefer for your screen to stick out the top like that, this is going to be a better option for you. Now, of course, if you're using a tablet that is taller than it is wide, the same will be true and it won't stick out quite as far. Personally, I think that this is okay because you can fold this thing up. You can put a video up here and your game down here, and that's pretty slick. And another cool thing is it's plugged in, so it is absolutely up and running. Let's take the phone back out of it, though, and we'll actually get a feel for these controls, these buttons, and see what we think about them. So let's look at the joystick first. Relatively large size, which means you've got a decent amount of travel. So shooters should be generally okay. It is definitely a smaller joystick than on this model. If we set the Galileo back down, this is the G8 Galileo, by the way. I haven't actually said the name of this thing. What about the buttons here? If we get a close look at them, they don't quite look as premium as the G8 Galileo did. You don't get the two-tone, but they do feel okay, but they are a little bit different. So the travel is definitely a lot less than the Galileo. These are clickier as well. So definitely a different sort of thing going on underneath these buttons. D-pad feels decent as well. Very clicky bumpers. And then, like I said earlier, the triggers are apparently Hall effect as well. Not too bad. It does feel a bit cheaper than the Galileo does, but it's also going to be cheaper. On the back side, this is interesting. It's full purple on the back with this rubberized grip as well. Let's pull the thing open. Not a lot of creaking or anything going on. It does definitely pull pretty good. You've got more rubberized stuff going on here. You can see how I can bend that, and then of course rubberized here and here as well. Home button, start select, and then your little quick capture button. You don't have access to the rear buttons either. One other thing it's missing from the Galileo is a audio pass-through. So this does have an auxiliary port down there, whereas this does not. All right, we're going to stream some Pal World from my computer, which, you know, that will add a little bit of latency, but honestly, with Moonlight, it's really not bad at all. So we can kind of get a decent idea of what we're dealing with here. And, I mean, look, I think that this feels pretty decent right off the bat. Let's throw out my Relaxosaurus. And then, of course, if you are using something like this, a really cool thing that you can do is you can grab your taskbar and you can throw YouTube up there, up at the top, and then have a YouTube video going, tilt that up a little bit, and you're absolutely multitasking like a champ. This kind of reminds me of the days of Surface Duo or something like that. This is pretty good, guys. Like, this actually feels pretty decent. Let's see if I can land a shot on this cat real quick. Let's get the Relaxosaurus out of the way because he's massive and he's blocking my aim. Actually, we'll shoot this Fox Parks. And then we'll throw my giant dinosaur out and he'll just destroy him. Not too bad. So now we've taken the X2S and we have slapped it onto my OnePlus Open, and as you can see, it does fit relatively well. You'd wish it maybe got down a little bit lower than that, and of course this is a fairly close to square screen, so you're going to have a lot more height in a full screen game like this, but it does still work even with that giant camera bump. You can see it actually sits inside that gap there, so that works out just fine. It's in there quite nice and firm. It's definitely not going to fall out or anything like that. It's not putting any strain or anything on it. Let's actually fire up a level here real quick. We'll create a new world. And we have Spawn staring at some dirt. Well, we've actually spawned almost trapped. Okay, there we go. So in terms of just the analog control, I think that there's more than enough range there to be just fine. Buttons are nice and clicky. I mean, look, this thing does not feel quite as premium as the Galileo, which I've already said. But man, for the price, this is pretty rock solid. It feels very good. If you're playing games like this, maybe you're doing emulators. Wow, spawned right next to a wolf already. Did I see a wolf? There it is. How convenient is that? You got to tame a wolf like straight away in this game for me. You always have to have a dog. Why are they fighting? Oh, it's a fox and a dog. Oh my lord, I'm not going to watch that. The horror of nature. You always got to have a dog wherever you are, though. That's just like a rule of nature. And a polar bear. We definitely won't go that way. What was I saying? Anyways, yeah, I do think that this feels pretty good, guys. So something else that we need to look at with this controller is the fact that there is an application. You can actually install the Gamesir app. I'm going to skip past this little splash screen. If you go down here to devices, you can do a firmware upgrade. You can also do a gamepad test, which can be potentially useful. And you can also do some key settings. Let's rotate this back around. And what you have here is the ability to change the layout from the standard Xbox layout to the Switch layout. Obviously, if you change it to the Switch layout, these buttons are still going to say the same thing. But in the software, they're going to behave differently. You also can go in here to the sticks, and you can change the dead zone with these joysticks. So I was playing Pal World streaming from my home computer, and I was noticing on the map, when I was trying to scroll around the map, the dead zone was just way, way, way too small. I could barely control it. So you can come over here to the left stick, and I think I bumped it up to somewhere around 10. And as you can see here, what's happening as you move this up, that white area is getting bigger, and that is your dead zone. So it's saying, hey, if you're moving inside that circle, nothing's going to happen. And I had it somewhere in that 10 to 15 range, and that seemed to kind of fix the problem for me. Now, it also says under 5%, you could get some stick drift because it's just too sensitive. So that's why they keep it at 5. And then on the triggers, you have some options too. So like I said, these are analog triggers, so you can push them down in varying degrees, but you can also change it to a hair trigger. So any amount of press at all is equivalent to a full press. Now, as I continued playing Pal World like this, one thing that I began to notice was that I was missing the larger grips from the Galileo model. I did start to kind of get a little bit of like a hand cramping thing going on in my right hand after a little while. Now, this is going to affect different people differently, right? So my hands are relatively small already. So you'd think this would be a better fit for me. If you have larger hands, it might be a bit more difficult. I also, this is a point of data here, perhaps. We'd recently had a lot of snow here where I'm at, and I had done quite a bit of snow shoveling, and my hand was already a little bit sore from just gripping the shovel. So it's possible that was also sort of making my right hand cramp a little bit faster than it normally would have. But you can see when you're holding this, it's just not very large. So since filming that bit, talking about, using the snow shovel and my hand maybe being a little bit more tired, I do want to point out that that sort of crampy feeling has mostly persisted for me. On long sessions, I do indeed miss the bigger grips on the Galileo G8. It's just a little bit smaller for me. But again, your mileage may vary on this. It's going to be comfortable, it's going to be portable, but it is smaller. And just like when you're using any smaller handheld, that's something that you have to think about. If we compare it to the Nintendo Switch Lite, you can see here that it is kind of close, kind of similar to that. So maybe you have some experience with the Switch Lite, and that will give you a little bit of an idea about what you're kind of dealing with here when you slap your phone inside this guy. So something else I do want to point out is that we do have button combinations. If you look at the instructions, you can see your little screen capture button, which normally just takes a screenshot. You can use that as a macro key. So if you hold it down and then use your triggers, you can enable or disable that hair trigger. You can also configure turbos. You can clear turbo. You see here how many different things you can do here. I'm just going to leave this kind of here for a moment. You can read what they say. Several different abilities you have there with that capture button, which is definitely a nice thing to have. So guys, overall, I do think this thing is really, really quite good. In particular, for the price, man, does it tick a lot of boxes and does it do a whole lot of stuff correct. If I have my choice, I'm probably still going with the G8. I do wish that the USB was on the other side, though. If you could somehow combine these two, you would have like the perfect game controller. But I think a lot of people are going to be right at home with the X2S. There's a lot of good stuff to like about it. And I think because of the side that that's on, us foldable users are going to really, really dig this controller. Let's take one last look at that Amazon listing. Again, there will be an affiliate link in the description down below. If you click on that link and you make a purchase, I will earn commission from said purchase. I also want to say a big thanks and shout out to Gamesir for sending this controller over. As usual, no money exchanged hands for the production of this review. No editorial input was given, and they are seeing my review at the exact same time as you are. Guys, thanks for watching. Subscribe for more content just like this, and until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.